What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. Ange Postecoglou is out at Spurs kind of at the beginning of the weekend, so I'm throwing that in there with this Weekend Roundup. I'll get to some of the international results here in a couple of minutes, but I want to start with Postecoglou. This is a really tricky, difficult situation where there is no quote-unquote right answer. There are reasons to keep him. There were reasons to fire him. Spurs obviously chose to go with the latter option there. I'm not going to relitigate everything. There are just a couple of things I want to throw out there in this conversation. I have written about this and I'll say it again here. The question that needs to be answered is actually a pretty simple one in terms of the direction Spurs should go in. Now, we don't know what the answer to that question is, but the question is this. Is Ange Postecoglou willing to do anything differently in the Premier League next season if he were to continue as Spurs manager? Because he has no problem saying that knockout tournaments are different, that they needed to win a trophy and do whatever it takes to make that happen, that it means more than finishing third. He's right about all that stuff. But is he willing to do anything differently when Mickey Van de Ven isn't in the lineup? When he doesn't have his preferred 11? When the team has lost 3 games in a row and just needs to hold on to a lead? When the team is playing 11v9 and down 2 players, like they did that one time against Chelsea, where nothing changed and they kept trying to score goals. Is he willing to budge on any of that? Because to me, if the answer was yes, he deserved to stay. If the answer was no, this was the right decision. Because they were going to be back in this spot 2, 3, 4 months down the road once the season started. So, 4, 5, 6 months from now. What was going to be dramatically different about Spurs doing the same thing while playing in the Champions League, not a Europa League with weaker opposition? Unless they were going to do something different. There are some similarities to the Erik ten Hag thing at United, and I'm holding the same line I did then. If you were going to fire him before the game, you should fire him after the game. You cannot be swayed by one individual game and one individual result. Now, the context is different because that trophy meant so much, because that game meant so much, because that was obviously the focus in a way the FA Cup wasn't for United. Spurs maybe don't finish 17th if the Europa League run isn't happening and that becomes the priority, and rightfully so. But they still lost 22 times and in another season could have been relegated. Even if they're dramatically better next year, they're mid-table. And that is also not good enough, and that is enough to get fired at Spurs. And so this probably should have happened before the Europa League, but you also don't want to mess with what is working, and there is a real strong case, even beforehand, and obviously now that they won the trophy, that your best chance to do so is keeping Postecoglou, and then figuring it out from there. So I guess I think this is more justified than probably most people, based on the reaction that I'm seeing. But there really is no, you had to fire him or he had to stay. And to me, if I'm Daniel Levy and Postecoglou comes in and says, I've got no plans to change anything in the Premier League, I say then it's not good enough. And we're not going to change our entire vision on that and our belief on that because we won one game. Because he would have been fired had they not won against United in the Europa League final. Therefore, he probably should have been fired even though they beat United in the Europa League final. But the context of that game and the way this whole thing played out, where everybody was out on him, the fan base was done, and then the fan base fell back in love with him because he ultimately delivered the trophy, made this really weird and awkward and difficult. But ultimately, you have to be able to demonstrate why next season is going to be different. And I'm just not sure that Ange Postecoglou did that, and that is why Spurs made the change. My gut feeling, my prediction would be that if he had stayed, he would be gone by Christmas, probably sooner. And in that sense, if that's actually what would have happened, and of course we'll never know, you got ahead of things. You got your next manager in place. You got the opportunity to have that manager then use this summer transfer window to start build a squad, the kind of squad that they want. Use the allure of the Champions League to capitalize on that with a new manager. Obviously, a lot of the players aren't happy. The fan base isn't happy. And there are understandable reasons why. But look at how far back United went and the consequences of keeping Ten Hag the way they did, simply because he won a game in a knockout competition. To me, it is not any different with Postecoglou. The context is a little bit different. It makes it trickier. But ultimately, 17th place is 17th place, 22 losses are 22 losses. And it is your job as a manager to play the cards you're dealt and to navigate the situation you find yourself in as well as possible. And I think we can all agree in the Premier League, which is what matters the most, Ange Postecoglou did not do that. And that in and of itself is enough for Spurs to justify making this change. It's going to be really interesting to see where they go from here, but Ange Postecoglou out at Spurs. Second thing here, biggest international development of the weekend. Portugal beat Spain in penalties to win the latest edition of the UEFA Nations League. In doing so, they become the first country to win this competition, as young as it is, 2 different times. That matters, and that especially matters for a team that has gotten a lot of criticism, including from me, for not showing up in major tournaments, for not maximizing their potential, and probably being too reliant on Cristiano Ronaldo and too deferential to him. They have won a European Championship. Now, that was a completely different set of players. But they have won 3 trophies, and Ronaldo came off injured in 2 of the 3 finals. Doing this again before a World Cup, beating your next door neighbors, and denying them an opportunity to win a 3rd consecutive European trophy for a 3rd consecutive year means something. There is significance here. Now, it's also kind of weird because it's not the same as the Euros, right, where you're kind of playing against everybody and you just sort of make sure you get to the final stages and then you play over 2 different periods of time with the quarterfinals and the semis, and then you go straight to the final, and it is different. But it is still a trophy that you're playing for. It means something heading in to a World Cup. It means something for Portugal and the legacy of this group of players who, again, have been better at this tournament than anybody else since it was created. The Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Jota, Ruben Diaz group of players. Obviously, they've continued to add more pieces to that weren't there for the other time they won this at the very beginning. But you do have to give Roberto Martinez some credit here. I have often been critical of the things Portugal have done in major tournaments. I still don't believe starting Cristiano Ronaldo is the best way to maximize this team. Just because he scores goals occasionally does not mean he deserves to be starting. However, he came up with 2 big ones in this tournament in the last 2 games. Now, he did next to nothing, and the things he did outside of that were more negative than positive. It's not like he was great. But he found a way to score 2 goals. That's what he's there for. That's what he did. But you were also able to do things like bring on Rafael Leao, who I continue to be a huge fan of and think he should be starting probably for this team. I also understand why he's not. Defensively, he gives you very little. And you bring him on against tired defenders, and that's what he can do. He caused havoc on the going up the left wing. That's what he was there to do. He helped really swing this game back in Portugal's favor. Obviously, this team is loaded. Diogo Jota came on at the very end. I mean, they're one of the 3-4 most talented teams in the world. And they have not been performing like it. And there were also plenty of opportunities in these two games where they could have just fell away. I mean, they could have lost the semi. They could have lost the final easily. So it's not like they put on some master class that makes you rethink everything you know about this team, or you thought you knew about this team. But they did find ways to win. And Ronaldo was part of that. And you got to give him credit for it. I'm still skeptical how much that means going into next summer. But it certainly doesn't hurt. And just to get some confidence in this group, to feel like you've kind of sort of maybe started to figure some things out. Nuno Mendes was the best player on the field by a mile in this game. He was spectacular, both going forward and defensively. Obviously, it's easy to point to him because he scored the goal. But the best thing he did was what he did against Lamine Yamal on the other end of the field. And you know what he gives you going forward, whether it's the ability to combine the crosses, every once in a while contributing a goal. He is really, really good, and he was fantastic in this game. On paper, I think there's an argument this is the most talented team in the world. I've been saying that. And I also don't trust them, which is what makes them so confusing and hard to figure out. Because you know they're capable of things like this, but they don't always do it. But now having done it twice, it does change the conversation a little bit, because coming into this tournament, you're thinking about this team as underperforming at the major tournaments, not doing well at the World Cup, not doing well at the Euros, and just generally leaving people disappointed, right? This doesn't change all of that. But they did just take out some pretty good opposition, and they did just become basically the only team in Europe that was able to stop Spain. Yes, they could have lost this game. They were behind twice. They had to go to a penalty shootout. I'm not going to overreact to this and all of a sudden make them the favorites to win the World Cup next summer. But they gave themselves an opportunity. They found a way to fight back in these games, and they got their trophy for it. And so I do want to give them their props, because this, like I said at the beginning, this does matter. There's a trophy on the line, there's bragging rights on the line, and there's building blocks toward next summer. And Portugal are using those to really improve where they're at and potentially the way they are viewed heading into the World Cup. A team that is doing the exact opposite of that is the U.S. men's national team. I'm not going to dive deep into this game against Turkey and analyze everything here. It's a friendly with a depleted roster. So and most of the issues are the same issues. However, there's one particular thing that I do want to highlight and look at moving into this final friendly, moving into the Gold Cup. This is an opportunity, and I specifically highlighted Malik Tillman when this initial roster came out. But really, it goes to all three midfielders who started in that game. Tillman, De La Torre, and Johnny Cardoso. Right? Tyler Adams was not in the lineup. Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, not here. Those three guys I mentioned initially are usually the ones off the bench in those central positions. right? Or the guys that you think, right? Cardoso, De La Torre have played a lot. Malik Tillman is the guy everybody's excited about that thinks could be the next player to push and maybe get into the starting lineup. Those are the guys you're looking at on this roster with all this inexperience to go step up and really stake their claim, not only to make the World Cup roster, but to maybe specifically Yunus Musa. Because I feel like if they're healthy, McKinney and Adams are locks. Musa, not so much with the way this season went in AC Milan. We'll see how next season goes and kind of what happens moving forward with him. But I think there's an opportunity here for one of those three guys to potentially take that spot from him. And instead, De La Torre was a non-factor. Johnny Cardoso had the horrendous mistake that completely changed the trajectory of the game. Now, it was not a comprehensive performance by the U.S. anyway. They responded really badly to the mistake. They could have equalized. It probably should have ended 2-2. But the defining moment of the game was a really bad giveaway from Johnny Cardoso. The best opportunity to end it 2-2 and to get the equalizer fell to Malik Tillman, who couldn't put the ball on either side of the goalkeeper from 5 yards out. Those are your three guys. Meanwhile, the goal in this game came from Jack McGlynn, who now has 3 goal involvements in 5 appearances for the U.S. men's national team. I'm not going to sit here and say that just because his national team career has gotten off to a good start, that all of a sudden he has passed these 3 guys in the pecking order and should be starting at the World Cup next summer. That is an extreme overreaction. What I am going to say is that Jack McGlynn has 3 things really going for him right now. Number 1, he is playing well when almost nobody else on this team is, especially of the guys who are supposed to be challenging the guys who are supposed to be locked to the starting lineup. Right? Those other roster spots that are kind of up for grabs. And even in this game, I'm really excited to see what Alex Freeman can do. Wasn't a lot from him. Max Arvston misses a couple of chances. Patrick Agyemang was fine but unspectacular. Matt Freese was fine. But none of these guys really did much in all of these positions where there are opportunities to take spots or to at least maybe not get the starting lineup, but at least get onto the squad. None of them are taking advantage of the fact that the other guys aren't here. For whatever reason, don't need to get back into that. Jack McGlynn is the one guy who is continually elevating his stock. The things specifically in his favor he has going for him, in terms of potentially making the World Cup squad, he has a specific skill that nobody else on this team has. That is one of the ways you earn one of those last roster spots. He has a remarkable left foot, set piece delivery during the game, crosses, passes, whatever it might be, and shooting, which you've seen with his little stint with the U.S. men's national team. There is not another player in this pool that does what Jack McGlynn does. That really helps. The second part, like I mentioned, is that he is playing well when nobody else is. So at least he's giving Pochettino something to think about. The third part is what happens if he finishes the season with the Houston Dynamo and then makes a move to Europe in the winter and then gets to play the second half of the season, right, January to May, leading up to the World Cup in Serie A or Ligue 1 or any of these leagues that have been sniffing around and been interested in him even before he got traded to Houston. What if that is when he makes that move and he plays well? From a club standpoint, all of a sudden, there isn't much difference between him and Johnny Cardoso and Malik Tillman and whoever else you want to throw. I mean, maybe even Yunus Musa if Yunus Musa's not getting on the field. Luca De La Torre's in MLS right now. Jack McGlynn at some point, I firmly believe, sooner rather than later, is going to be playing in a top 5 league in Europe. If he has all of the momentum and the positivity going into that, and then he elevates where he's not just another MLS guy that's getting an opportunity, but he is a starter, right? This is kind of how Tanner Testament got himself involved. All of a sudden, he's playing an important role in Europe. You kind of have to give him a chance. So if he's on the same level as these other guys that we're talking about for these other midfield spots, and he's outperforming them specifically when he shows up for national team duty, and you know that if you're down a goal in the 85th minute and you're going to be pinging a bunch of crosses into the box, he's the best player you have available in your entire pool to do that. There's a lot of reasons to bring him. This is all just conjecture and projection, right? We don't know how the rest of this MLS season is going to play out. We don't know that he's moving in the winter. But that's all I was sitting there thinking about evaluating this game. As the narrative correctly is, all of these guys are failing to take their opportunity. They are falling short in the exact same ways that the starters did. The one guy who is actually doing something to help himself is Jack McGlynn, and that has to matter to Mauricio Pochettino as he keeps giving guys opportunities and they keep disappointing him for the most part. This could all change dramatically by the end of the Gold Cup if Malik Tillman has a phenomenal tournament, rises to the occasion, or Luca de la Torre is great, or whatever it might be. Maybe Jack McGlynn doesn't even get to start those games. And then it's a little bit different conversation. But right now, he is the one guy of all of these players getting opportunities through these last, we'll call it 6 months or so specifically, when Pochettino has come in and kind of turned the page with everything. He is the one guy who has really, 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 really helped his stock based on what he has done in a U.S. jersey. This game was another example of that. Another disappointing performance. See if they can bounce back in the final tune-up against Switzerland and then heading into the Gold Cup. That is all for this week's edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.